Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Chaos and Caffeine. I'm trying out my new sunglasses because we're going to go to the sunny part of the world, and an associate of ours who came up from Guatemala and brought us some Guatemalan coffee, some real stuff back at Reliable Plant. Now, I thought this was really cool. And by the way, it came in this really cool bag, and you'll see that on the screen as we're brewing it. So that's our taste this week, and this is I actually brought two of them. This one here, because it's Mayan Gold, I definitely wanted to try this one first. So we will give it a shot. It's quite aromatic. Tough to get the coffee out. But this is going into a thing. If this is good, we're going to take a couple of weeks before we try the other one, because this one, well, actually, it might only make it a few days. But in any case, that's besides the point. So here's the taste. That is awesome. That is really awesome. Hand delivered and everything from Guatemala. I'll put a link to the person who brought it up if you want to check him out on LinkedIn. But in any case, this week we're going to have a little bit of fun. I'll sec. We are going to explore a couple of wind-based myths. So I'm going to let you hear something, because there's things that have been said recently, because for some reason, alternative energy has been mixed in with politics now for about a decade, and that's a serious problem. It was never meant to go down this path. Everybody's associated with stuff with one way or another. The utility industry understands the importance, and grid industry understands the importance of what we actually call in standards organizations IBR, which is Inverter-Based Resources. Sounds horrible. You know, what does that mean? Well, that means, in effect, there are certain controls that are in place. They're electronic controls. Now, if we hearken back to what happened in Spain earlier this year, with the entire Spanish peninsula going dark for a period of time, and I'll note, I talked about this in an earlier version, the inverter-based resources were specifically, very specifically, not called out as part of the problem by the people who had the data. That includes the Spanish government and the operators, including a third group, which are the European operators, and I'll link back to that episode at the end of this one. So, in effect, the reports concluded, as have we in the U.S. on the utility side in CGRE and IEEE, basically the engineers involved. And I hate when politicians become engineers, because, you know, they were medical doctors for the, 2020. Now they're engineers for energy. They're not listening to the people involved in the actual energy production. That is a serious problem. So we'll talk about that more, because I'm going to do a few episodes on this based upon the kind of stuff we've heard. Now, I have personally been on about 6,000 turbines in the United States, individual turbines, because we go out and we do surveys. I'm in these plants all the time. So in the end, you're going to get to see all the invisible dead birds on a site. We have a drive-through, and so instead of the usual credits at the end, you get to sit back and relax to the wonderful drive through farmland where we have some wind turbines in West Texas. So we don't have it. Our client did. So, and just to be aware, the sounds you're about to hear are a variety of sounds, because we are in pipelines, we are in oil rigs, we are in coal-fired power plants. Yes, they still exist. We are in wind, we are in solar, we are basically in every type of power generation. I am an all of the above person, and the reason why I believe that these are important based upon the facts is simply this. In order to react to all of the new electronic systems that are going in place, in particular, in order to react to prevent what happened in Spain from happening in the United States with the influx of data centers that are being approved to come in and slap into areas that don't have the infrastructure for it, we need systems that can react fast without increasing our costs. Well, we're going to increase our costs because it's been decided that all of the people in the areas that will have the data centers are going to have to pay for the infrastructure. That's the way it is. They're going to be large ratepayers, so everybody gets to share in the improved grid for their area. So, folks, if you think it's going to drive down your cost, your ability to, like me, make my Reliasquatch images and stuff like that, that's feeding all of this stuff, right? So, welcome to the new world. Welcome to what's going to be an increase in your energy costs. Many of us in the U.S. are feeling that impact already, as this year, with the energy being used by data centers exceeding 8% of the total electrical energy in the U.S., the next largest system is only 2%. that's water and wastewater. Okay, and it's meant to hit 15% by 2030 and 25% by 2040. So all of that electronic load has to be controlled in some way, and it has to be instantaneous or near instantaneous, meaning electronic speeds. That's where wind, solar, and battery storage come in very important with their electronic switching. They're able to do the voltage and some frequency control now, with a lot of work going on in a different type of technology that allow for being able to do more with those resources. So in effect, what they call synthetic inertia and a few other things. All engineering terms. I'm trying to make Chaos and Caffeine not too technical. If you want to see the technical stuff, go see my other MotorDoc vlog. But in any case, let's get down to this. One of the things we'd heard, this is good stuff. Thanks, Walt. Thank goodness I brought extra too. Yeah, so I'm all set. In any case, because this will be, I tried to do the 10 to 15 minute. Obviously, it's never going to meet that. I talk too much. So let's get into this. Let's start with the sound. Sound causing this, that. They're horribly sounding things. So I'm going to play you 5 sounds. Let's start with this one. Sound number 1. Okay, I won't tell you what that is yet. Okay, sound number 2. Yep, it's playing a sound. All with the same phone. Okay, sound number 3. Sound number 4. That one goes on for a little while. Sound number 5. Now, supposedly, the sound of a wind turbine causes you to get cancer. So, what's the first sound we heard? This one. That's an oil derrick. That is a drill rig, drilling for oil. What's this sound? That's a wind farm. What's this sound? That's a power plant transformer. 125 kV to 13,800 volts. What's this sound? That's an electric motor in a plant. And what does this sound? That's standing inside a wind turbine. So those are the sounds, and each of them involve electronic systems, and what you're hearing is harmonic noise and the frequencies from those electronic systems. There's not a lot of difference. What we run into, because be perfectly blunt, everybody's like, oh, this and that and this and that with the materials used for wind turbines. They're not any different than what we use to build the factories, data centers, and everything else that we use. The generators are the same, are built, well, they're not exactly the same in shape and weight, but they're exactly the same as what we would use in a large power generator, just smaller. They're the same as what we would have if you have something that says Generac or one of those gray or orange boxes outside your building that's a generator. It's not any different than that. So what basically was being stated is the noise from everything around us, the HVAC system in your background, which mine's being filtered out from the podcast. That's one of that new one for energy efficiency has an inverter in it. I have a slight sound like those in the background. If I listen for it carefully, I can hear it. So in effect, if that's the case, then electrifying everything and moving forward and not living in a cave with a fire nearby is somehow going to cause all these problems. Absolutely false. That was debunked a long time ago. Plus, all of them have to meet what are called EMI, electromagnetic induction, or radio waves coming off of them have to meet certain standards to get that irradiation and it's magnetic fields, by the way, that magnetic field induction down to a level that's imperceptible because of all this stuff. And if you remember back, if you're older like me, you'll remember when they talked about two-headed cows because of power lines, because a bunch of lawyers wanted to make money by suing people. Okay, it all comes down to money. Okay, or politicians wanting to do stuff. Okay, so there's all of that. Now, the appearance of wind turbines, because wind turbines and solar farms are being blamed for taking up land and property and stuff like that. So basically causing problems with the ability to farm. Well, first off, I live in the outskirts of the Chicagoland area. So as we go out further, we're watching farmland being bought up, houses and stores and everything else being built there. That's been going on since I moved in this area in the 1970s. So it's been progressively going out, and we're losing that farmland. It'd be really a problem if they hit DeKalb. But in any case, that's besides the point. So what we're now seeing, though, so when they put in, say, wind, if we put in a bunch of wind turbines, I keep hearing how wind turbines are destroying the farmland and everything else. They take up small dots here and there. They put in roads for the farmers to get their equipment places. There's all agreement in place. What everybody forgets to mention is part of the putting the wind companies aren't buying this land and stripping it and everything else. They're renting the property from the farmers and ranchers. That means the farmers and ranchers who agree to put these things on their property are being paid to do that. Usually, they're small independents that need the extra funding that comes year-round that helps them with their farm. Otherwise, why do it? They're businessmen and women, of course. I met one up in Wisconsin. She owned a large plot of land. She was very upset when she thought we were going to be turning on and off towers because that meant that was income they weren't receiving. Okay, so we talk about helping our independent farmers and everything else, but we want to stop one way of doing that. Whereas a data center, and the data centers are going into large plots of land, including, old farm fields and stuff like that. I'm going to do a couple of overhead pictures here that show you the difference on what one of those look like versus the other. By golly, we want those like mad, and they're not small. They take up a huge chunk of land. You have to plow everything under. It's all gone. It is no longer farmland. It is now a very large building. So the question is, the land and the appearance. Would you like to have a large block white building in the middle of nowhere that basically has no aesthetic appearance to it? Or something that's dynamic and has motion and everything else? So then we get into the next part. And I'll tell you what. Large hotels in cities are blamed for more bird deaths than a wind turbine. I'll let that sink in. You can make your assumptions as you will, but in reality, cars driving down the highway. I have seen dead birds. I've had dead birds take out the windows in a truck once, or I had a bird take out a duck, take out a window in my truck once because I was traveling, and I remember going to some wind sites, and I think at one point birds deciding to race the car across the road. They're sitting there, and then all of a sudden a car's coming along, and they decide to play chicken. I've hit a few that way. I've had to pull them out of the grill. But I have yet to see on 6,000 turbines done over a period of 2003 to the present, personally being on site. Yet to see a single dead bird that was an impact against either the side of the wind turbine or the blades. The only time I've seen the result of a large raptor, meaning they were, I don't know if it was a duck or a large bird, striking a wind turbine, the blade. What happens is the blades are made out of fiberglass, and just like if you have a truck or a vehicle hitting a deer, that kills people, right? You hit the deer, it damages your vehicle. Well, a large bird hitting a blade, which is turning between 14 and 19 RPM, the tip speed is incredible. If you go any faster, it becomes supersonic. So it comes down. If it strikes that bird, it destroys it. Destroys the blade. So so we would have broken blades everywhere. So one of the claims on stage at an event was the 2.2 billion birds that were accounted for by the environmentalists a few years ago. That was the total bird deaths in the United States. 0.02% of that was attributed to being in the area of a wind farm, meaning, and let me qualify this. From the environmental rules that we have to follow when we're on a job site, on a wind site, if we see any dead animal, any dead anything on the site, anywhere, and you're talking about a wind turbine, just to give you some perspective, a wind turbine, some of the smaller ones to the hub is about 240 feet. The average height is about 300 feet. So about the same height as a good-sized building. Figure 10 feet per floor, right? So a 30-story building. And some of the gigantic ones, which, we're not going to see them on land as much because it's too costly to move everything. So we got a limit of about 5 megawatt right now. There's been some attempts at larger, but really on land, primarily 5 megawatt, maybe sometimes 7.5 megawatt. Sounds big, it is, and that's the whole point. It's too large. You hit a point where you have diminishing returns on land, so you put them offshore, where we've got 15 megawatts, some claims at 20 and 25 megawatt, very, very large towers. Okay, put that in perspective. A power plant, say a coal-fired power plant like the one in Omaha, just off the highway, Mid-America, is 1,000 megawatt, 500 megawatt generators. And that takes up, by the way, a large chunk of land as well. So, but we need it. We need that. That is synchronous generation. That's used for handling what's called grid inertia or oscillations in the supply frequency. All the engineering stuff that we need to keep the grid afloat. Which, by the way, reminds me, you've got the bulk grid, which is the very, very high level stuff where we're talking about distribution from 125,000 volts to 750,000 volts, right? So that they can keep the conductors small. All kinds of new technology going into that for keeping the cost down for running new copper, and so on and so on and so on. So there's a lot of stuff going on from the engineering side that is helping us survive what's going on. And that is that rapid growth of high-tech stuff. So all this new high-tech AI stuff is requiring the grid to grow faster than it has ever done, ever. Like they're talking about, I think the fastest growth since the early 1920s was 2% per year. Now they're talking about having to go 50% to 100%, meaning doubling the size of the grid every other year. So that's incredible. We're just talking about, some are 5%, some are as high as that, because believe it or not all of these things that are being suggested, like Microsoft pulled out of 2.2 gigawatts of data centers, which is basically the equivalent of 2 DeLoreans. That is a Back to the Future reference for you young folks, but that's besides the point. So let's get into the next part, and that is bird strikes. So what we're required to do when we go on site, as I've just mentioned, is anything we see that's dead has to be recorded. That's a federal law. It's a felony not to. All kinds of stuff. So the suggestion that birds are cleaned up before there's visitors was basically accusing everybody in the wind industry of breaking federal law, and we should be going to jail forever. So that's not true. As a matter of fact, most of the people involved, who tend to be out in the field, who've lived with animals all their lives, because a lot of the people hired are people that are in rural areas where there's not a lot of jobs to begin with. So there's a lot of jobs in areas that are in certain districts that basically their choice is that or farmhand, right? And they're great, lucrative jobs. They pay extremely well. The hours aren't too horrible. The conditions are pretty rough. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. If you're sitting at home playing video games, chances are you're not going to want to climb around in the extremes of a wind turbine. Now, if you're into skateboarding and mountain climbing and all that, you'll have a blast. I mean, you figure most of these things do not have elevators in them. They're straight vertical ladders. So you're up and down. Let's see, we went to a site. We had to do 5 turbines in one day. We had 2 technicians that had to climb up each tower. So they climb up, set everything, climb back down because you can't be up tower when it runs. Run our tests. Then they had to run up and back down again. So that was a total of up and down 10 times to do 5 turbines and 20 times to do 10 turbines. So a lot of exercise. If you were to see me in full body, I don't climb that often or at all, actually. So I developed a method so we can do most of the stuff down tower. But that's another story. In any case, so at the end of this video, I'm going to allow it to run. I'll put some music to it so you can enjoy it. Just a tour of a wind site. We went on the wind site. I had a steady cam in the front of the pickup truck. The original purpose was to show why we drive a pickup truck through a wind site. Why you can't drive a regular vehicle. Through those sites, why we are careful about heavier vehicles like the hybrid electric or electric vehicle with the heavy batteries becomes a bit of a problem on a wind site because of the type of land we're driving through. Sometimes you have to go off into a farm field and you would sink. But in any case, so I have yet to see a single bird strike in real life. Now, I've seen some AI-generated ones on LinkedIn and some of the other channels, social media stuff where people say, "Hey, Howard, can you comment on this?" And you go and Now, my favorite one was on a Vestas machine, and there was a little Fiat type, vehicle at the bottom, a tiny little car. I think it was taken in Europe or something. Supposedly this guy was videoing, and you watch a large eagle circling around the wind turbine, and all of a sudden you hear boom, and the eagle was, this blade which was about this big, and the eagle which was about this big, or about a third the length of the blade, gets struck, and then it falls down, and it's a little thing behind the truck, or behind the vehicle, behind the car, which is, the car is one of those mini cars. So it lands there, and it lifts its head, and then it dies. So somebody said, "Can you take a look at that?" And I go, "Yeah, that's a V80. The blades are 45 meters in length. So at the top, that bird was about 15 meters wingspan, which would be 45 feet. And then it landed, and it was smaller than the car. I said, I suggest whoever created that video probably get their scale correct." So one of the problems I have with the AI generated stuff that's causing the problem is that there's a lot of fake videos out there. So there's been some other instances where things like that have occurred that are absolutely untrue. Now, don't get me wrong, we have our issues. I'm working on my paper right now for the grid industry, and I've just done a whole bunch of papers on wind turbine reliability for IEEE over the summer, and I sit on now. I thought I had other people because I chaired standards for American Clean Power up until recently. Now I'm slipping back in the IEEE standards on the Power Engineering Society, because we have the practical data, and most everybody else is doing what I will call synthetic data, and that's my topic for next week. It really ticks me off. Reality and computer simulation. I'm sorry, they do not match. I'll do my rant on that next week. But in any case, we have some reliability things we have to deal with. We have 98% availability on average for per wind turbine. We have close to 100% availability for wind farms. We're trying to get it so that we can get lower wind without doing more damage to stuff. And there's a whole bunch of other things that we can utilize those electronic resources, their inverter-based resources, for helping us use the grid. In fact, in Texas, after the 2021 incident, which was frozen supplies, so they weren't able to get natural gas to things. Of course, it was blamed on the energy source that was not used at that time, less than 10% of the total energy consumption in a state that could basically, on some days, fully power the whole state off of alternative energy. But you'll only ever see that in fall and spring. Okay, so in winter and summer, deep winter and summer, because the coldest days, do you feel a wind? Not often, right? And that's what happened down there. They had extremely cold days. There wasn't a lot of wind, slightly more than they expected, so they were able to get solar to help. They were able to get wind to help and hang on as long as they could to supply just enough power in 2021. So, of course, the power supply that helped keep everything up and running to the extent it could was blamed for the fact that all of the standard power generation was not winterized. So natural gas supplies froze trying to get to the gas plants and everything else. So now there's rules going in place for winterization. This year, because of the extremely high use of energy, in particular by everybody, right? So we're electrifying everything, and we're trying to keep up with people electrifying everything. Plus you throw in the data center stuff, right? That I'll cover a little later on some strategies that different folks are doing to try to curb this. And that includes the data centers. But that's a whole other subject. We'll hit that either next week or the week after, depending on when I want to do my rant. But in any case, they went from a 16% chance during this summer of the state of Texas going dark to less than 1% because of the new battery storage brought online, solar brought online, and wind brought online. And that's not put out by the wind or solar or energy storage, and that was brought out by ERCOT. There are formulas to do it. It's an engineering thing. It's a grid thing. There are rules and laws that are in place to do those calculations. So it's not whatever I feel like trying to make up today. That's political. That would be a political thing, right? So the rules that we have to follow to keep the grid up and running are very, very different. To put that into perspective, I sit on the IEEE Grid Code Committee and some other stuff. So, I'm one of those volunteers that's there to try to keep everything up and running. Our problem is in the industry is some bias, primarily generated by, media that have become, just like politicians, a talking head all of a sudden is an expert in this, that, or the other thing, or somebody who wrote a book, or we're watching editorial thinking that it's news and facts. And by the way, I'm talking about all of the directions, right or left. I don't care. Most of them have no clue as to what's going on. Nobody's interviewing the people who are actually involved in any of this stuff. And then you get up to the point where you now talk about politicians. There's a handful of politicians that I work with because we're on the Hill every year since 1993 talking about everything from workforce development to power generation and electrical reliability. That's my focus, cybersecurity and things like that. When we go on the Hill, we're not usually talking to the guys who are the talking heads on TV. They know how to speak well, but not necessarily understand the topic. It's difficult to find somebody who's not completely absorbed in what they do that knows much about multiple topics, right? And then you have a politician whose sole purpose is to be reelected and raise funds. Now all of a sudden they're also all these other expertise. Now if they were a medical doctor before they got in, then I'd listen to them. If they were an engineer before they went in, then I'd listen to them. But they're lawyers for a majority of them. So I'm sorry, I don't know any lawyers who know a lot about power generation or grid operation and things like that. I have limited knowledge. It's a huge, complex topic. And what's happening between, each administration, you've got the industry trying to get things to work when politicians get involved and start putting things in place for special interest groups that have their own idea in mind that want money versus the people that are out there, the engineers. Most engineers I know, even when they're wrong, are trying to do the right thing. When we have engineering bodies that are writing standards for this stuff, and then all of a sudden we get blindsided by some opinion that is now, the rule because they're pissed off at the other party and that party's pissed off at that party, so they start fighting and one comes into power and they change the rules and the other one comes in power, they change the rules. It takes 7 years to get a wind site built, and that most of that is all the bureaucracy. It doesn't take long to build it. Steam plants, it takes up to 15 years just to go through all that stuff, especially environmental stuff. There's whole studies that have to occur before you build power generation, let alone we don't even have the grid infrastructure. I think we're at 1.73 terawatts of energy that still have to be connected. We have, a nuclear power plant, 20 to 25 years, because of the greatest amount of bureaucracy there because of back when everybody was afraid in the Cold War that we would have meltdowns and explosions, and Chernobyl didn't help. You hear about that now, and if you're younger than when Chernobyl happened, you don't understand the big global scare that went on. I mean, these were not minor things, and rules, knee-jerk rules, went in place because of public opinion, which had nothing to do with engineering. So that type of plant was completely different than the plants we had in the U.S. The plant in Japan that had the problem was completely different than what we have in the U.S. and South Korea, where I was working on nuclear plants there. When we look at all this stuff and people just make assumptions based on whatever they see on TV at that time, and since 2020, it's been incredible. So getting back to this whole thing, invisible birds. Now, there are 73,746 wind turbines that are operational. Yep, we've got it down to the individual turbine. There are databases for that, including exactly where they're located. So what did I say? 74,736. Okay, so that's 74,736. So let's go ahead and remember that, and we're going to put in 2,200,000,000 divided by, so 2.2 billion birds killed, right? Divided by 74,736. Okay, that's 29,436.37 birds killed per year. So let's, how many hours are there in a year? So let's say 8760. Okay, that's 3.3 birds, 3.4 birds per hour. Now, because the capacity factor of the wind turbine, it's about a third of that. So what it comes down to, if I were approaching a tower, that would be about, I would be pelted by about 12 birds an hour. Okay, so as was stated, you would see a pile of dead invisible birds at the base of a tower. Somebody suggested they're thrown away from the tower, so when you watch the video, look for dead animals, look for dead birds. I took it on a site in the panhandle of Texas. It's all farmland. There's actually in the video a bird that flies by the window. Here's what happens. As soon as the blades start turning, because there's nothing up there for them to eat, the raptors and everything scatter. They scatter. We did a video of that once at a place where sight was completely down, and then you start to hear the blades, because the blades, the turbines make noise. They yaw, so they turn towards the wind before they start spinning. So you hear the sound, and they start to turn, and then you just watch all the birds scatter. They don't want to be around these things. They make noise. They scare off the prey. And then they start up. The only birds that are left are the ones that fly low to the ground and take out the bugs. Also, another thing that occurs is, we've been in towers, and we have to be really careful. We can't disturb anything. So I've gone into towers, and there's been mice right at the entrance, right? So they'll be there, and they'll have a nest right at the entrance. We have to avoid them. We have to step over them. We've seen assassin bugs, black widows, rattlers, and all that. And unlike landsmen, you don't kill the rattlers when you walk up on there. That's a big deal. You can't kill the animals. We've seen turtles. We've seen tortoises. We've seen, you name it. We've seen animals alive moving around near the tower. Cattle and ranches love them because they can get underneath the tower at certain times of the day and get shade. So we've got lots of video of that. They crowd in over by the towers because other than that, it's open land. There's nowhere for them to go to get shade. So they go over there and they are able to stay cool, and there's plenty of whatever they're going to eat near the towers. So, you have to be careful. We can't disturb that stuff. We go through training when you approach a site on what you have to do and not do each time. So keep that in mind when you hear stuff that's opinion, in order to convince people of certain things that are not factual. What's the term? Counterfactual? No, that's actually, that's a prediction of stuff. Never mind. So, in any case, as we get involved in these things, I'm sorry, I'm not wading through birds when I approach a tower. I might be stepping in a lot of cow dung on a ranch, or dealing with corn that comes right up to the gravel road, or whatever else that the farmer is growing. And they normally will often park after plowing, they'll park on the road, so we have to go around it, and that's part of the reason my four-wheel drive when we go off, I've actually sunk all the way down to the steps into my vehicle. That kind of thing. There's no way I would take a personal vehicle on there, and that's a funny story that I had once. I was going to a wind farm, and I had ordered a pickup truck ahead of time, four-wheel drive pickup truck from Hertz. And so I get out there, and they said, oh, yeah, we gave it to this guy who had always wanted to drive a pickup truck, and he never owned one, so we rented it to him. Here's your upgrade to a Mustang. And I told them, well, I need you to sign a piece of paper saying I'm not responsible for what's going to happen to that Mustang, and I hope you're able to tow out where I'm going. So in the end, they gave me a Jeep, which was bad enough because it was a road Jeep, not an off-road Jeep. But in any case, we were able to survive that. Luckily, the roads were graded and everything there, nice and flat. That was a beautiful sight in Idaho. But yeah, when I go to these sites, personally, I like the view. It's nice. You see all farmland, and then you just see, the towers sitting there, and they turn, and at night you'll see a field of lights flick on, flick off, flick on, flick off. That's for aircraft, a requirement for aircraft because they're that tall. In any case, I'm going to let you enjoy the tour of a wind farm. If you have any questions, go to our website. That'll be at the very, very end. Feel free to reach out in the comment section. I do not allow comments on YouTube because, sometimes they get pretty nasty. And really, I'm all about, the positive side of industrial, commercial, and power generation. So feel free to reach out and ask questions. If we can, we'll respond. With that, have a great day.
Morning's a riot, no time for a dream. Wide and wild, fueled by caffeine. Machines hum loud, chaos is king. Chaos, chaos and caffeine. Buzzing veins in a metal sheet. Chaos, chaos and caffeine. This is the grind we're caught between. Sparks fly high, gears scream loud. Order lost in the ticking crowd. Chaos, chaos, chaos now.
Okay, folks, you're going to see why I need this kind of truck for when we do wind sites. I think we'll cross. Let's see. We'll see the roads are outstanding. Let's see. going to go ahead and did this coming in at 2-wheel. Let's go to 4-wheel this time. We attempted to use a passenger vehicle back here. Never a good idea. Okay, so watch a truck in front of us. And then when we get to that one, that'll be kind of one of the washout areas. We'll do that one next. Once we get through this. It's a nice view though. We're averaging about 5 minutes a tower on this trip for testing. Okay, I'll be back. Okay, somebody recently asked me why we need to use off-road vehicles to do wind turbines. So let's explore a typical road. Now this is fun because I remember going and flying in somewhere and having rented a 4-wheel pickup truck, and they wanted to upgrade me to a Mustang, and the roads were far worse than this one at that site. So I was like, okay, rental company, why don't you assign me or have me sign off so I'm not responsible for the condition of this Mustang that you gave me after I asked for a heavy vehicle. So typical when I'm dealing with ranches and farms where a lot of these things are, you can see what's the vehicle in front of me. There we go. I am now in 4-wheel drive. You can see the washout. These are pretty typical. There is no other way in. Down we go. Whoa, yeah, woo! And then, so this is a Silverado. Yeah, that's swinging. Yeah, the phone's pretty much fixed. So, anyways, yeah, this is an off-road Silverado, and there's a reason why I use these. Somebody said, well, whatever. And it's like, yeah, well, sorry. Type of vehicles people were suggesting do not fly very well in this environment. So with that, enjoy the view, and we are going to continue with our empath electrical signature analysis testing of over 100 turbines in just a few days. And if you looked at the timestamp on the last one, you notice it's only a couple of minutes between towers, and we are in the tower less than 5 minutes. So, and all the results are automatic, so we're providing live condition as we go through, including, you know, how much longer the tower has or severity. With that, talk to you more later. Of course, we also get those stretches where, you know, we've got actual highway, but that's in between the towers. So we're heading out to another spot. You can see, you know, nice country. I missed there's another company site to the left, another generation site, the one on the right of the GE towers we're looking at. In general, you know, straightforward stuff, looking at the entire powertrain, about a minute, 48 seconds to rule the world. And, you know, been doing this now for 2003. I started doing field work with electrical signature analysis, looking at the gearboxes. So in any case, I guess now we're going to look for a way over, not clear on the condition of the location where we're going. Some of the roads are pretty extravagant. But here we go, I guess. Doing the podcast is I'll show a couple of sites. It's always fun following another tech on the road. Yeah, it's about that clear. You see the dust spot, and you're actually the camera's off to the right, so it's easier to see on that side. On the driver's side, I've got to watch for lights. That's why we follow so far in between. There's also a crack in my windshield already, but it's not from following close. It was from somebody else on the highway nearby who got on the road with rocks pouring out. So in any case, yeah, we'll just show you coming up to a typical tower. That off-road bit was not as severe as some I've been on. Some have been to the point where we've actually had to hike. But let's just say your average vehicle, especially heavier vehicles, will not survive this. This is part of the reason why, we drive pickup trucks, which are much lighter than, say, a full-size SUV. They also have to be up off the ground a little bit, because some of the areas we go in are pretty drastic. Say, potholes here. Well, I guess I'm a little used to it. I've driven in Manhattan and Chicago and Illinois, I should say, and a few other areas where, potholes can be exciting. Okay. Oh, we're back in two-wheel drive, by the way. We don't need four-wheel for this. Hey, some of the sites are interesting. I mean, it's an interesting looking barn thing off there on the right. Looks like we're going to go down to the furthest one, turn around and come back. These are farm roads too. So these are actually made by the wind company. They may come put gravel down and stuff like that. They have to be set up, be able to handle cranes and heavy vehicles. Some of the roads we went on, they'd actually end up going through with a grader or something to clean it up if they were to go in to do a gearbox or something. You can see we're on farmland right now. So it's very, very delicate here. There is no going off the things. We do not want to run over farmers' crops. That's a big no-no. Sometimes we run into where a farmer will park in the right on this part of it. It can get pretty exciting. But in any case, here we are at the next tower. Time to go on board. Another time I'll do something about how to enter and set up. But for now, talk more later. Now, if I get a chance here, I'm going to give you some perspective, because I'm hearing a lot about a tornado could do like whatever, wipe out the grid or something like that. Well, right now we are 10 miles from the middle of this one particular site with several hundred turbines present, and what we're looking at to the right and in front, that is a whole other site. That's not the group we're working with. That's somebody else. We're about to head down to another group of towers, so I'm going to be turning away from the main fields. There's no way a single tornado is going to take out more than a handful of towers. And at any given time, that's basically what you have down for maintenance. So, a lot of the guff I'm seeing on the news is just that. It's drama to get headlines and feed on the concerns of people that an alternative energy source, really, I mean, at some point it became political. I don't see it as political. I just see it as another energy source. As far as I'm concerned, I've been the past month I've been on drill sites testing, I've been on fracking sites, I've been on wind sites, I've been to solar sites, been to a number of other types of energy sites. That thing on to the right over there, that's a weather tower. That's not a cell tower. They set those in strategic spots for determining what wind speed is. The one over there on the right, that is, if you can see it, that is a cell tower. But yeah, when we turn around to the far right, just out of the picture, I think is a whole slew of other ones. We get to this tower down here on the left. When I circle around, you probably get, in the distance, but you'll get some idea of, an area that has wind. And like I said, you would need, you'd need a 20-mile wide tornado to take out every turbine. In the meantime, you're talking about one of the areas that's the highest in the U.S. for total wind. And occasionally, if I do some, if I take another video or two here, you'll see the oil pump, the oil heads pumping oil, stuff like that. Here we go. So, give you just a perspective. We're at the far side of this park, and there's a deer. That is cool. Is that a deer? Yeah, that is cool. Or an antelope? No, it's... Wow, there's more. Yep. So anyways, yeah, a lot of wild stuff out here, but you see everything. We're going to have to wait a second until they clear out. But anyways, talk to you more after. Okay, and just to continue, because we're at the far corner of this park, just to give you an idea, continued, so spread out. They're in strings of, some places 5, some places 8, usually 10 per string, and it's about it. So we're gonna do these next few. Wow! So we're gonna knock out 45 in a day, so not too shabby. Okay, and this should be it, unless we get another exciting area. But have fun. So another quick preview from our podcast yesterday, or this is not in our podcast yesterday. This is the one I wanted to get in there, but oh well. But happy birthday to me. Wind speed is beautiful. Everything's producing. And we got the back roads. So I'll show you what I'm talking about now. Okay, let them go first. Never follow somebody into a pit. I said, why do you drive this kind of car? Why do you drive that kind of car? Why do you drive a 4-wheel drive pickup truck? Well, here's why. There we go. Straight down. And back up again. And that's how we get between towers. So with that, have a great day, folks, and see you on the other side. If you haven't had a chance, go find the podcast on motordockai.io, or find it on my LinkedIn, and you'll see some of the adventures here. We also spend some time debunking some of the myths by seeing it. So we'll talk to you soon.